I'm Autumn Lockett,
And this is Mitch Randall.
and you're listening to Good Faith Weekly.
Welcome to Good Faith Weekly. And on this episode, Autumn and I are going to catch up. We're going to talk about the recently announced retirement of Justice Stephen Breyer. We're going to talk about a comeback for whales, which is really exciting. And we're also going to talk about what's going on in the Ukraine with possible invasion of Russia. And then later on in the pod, we're going to sit down with Student Awesome, who has a website, Islamophobia.io. It's a very, very interesting interview. And Autumn and I want to talk a little bit more about what Islamophobia is about and how we can prevent it here in our community. So stay tuned. It's going to be a good episode.
Let's get back in the water. I'm Reverend Starlette Thomas, and I'm inviting you to join me in the water. Well, it's a virtual gathering, too. The Raceless Gospel Initiative at Good Faith Media will host its first webinar, introducing the Raceless Gospel, on February 24th at 12 p.m. Central and 1 p.m. Eastern. We'll go down in the water of baptism, where we are invited to examine ourselves as members of Christ's body, and to question why these color-coded labels stick to our skin. The webinar will be a safe space for you and for me, for all working to reconcile the North American Church's history with race. It is also for those ready to embody a countercultural narrative that challenges the continued segregation of sacred space. I look forward to seeing you and to diving into this much-needed work. May our time together have rippling effects. The event is free. Please register at goodfaithmedia.org.
Autumn, how are things?
Things are going well. We are sort of soaring into that second semester with the kiddos. Everybody's in school. Everyone's healthy. So we're feeling good. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great. Seems to be... we had a little snow this week here in Norman, Oklahoma, which is always exciting. Yeah, we're doing well. We had a little bit of a COVID spell this week. I came down with a cough and sniffles, and of course, everything that you hear with Omicron. We rushed to the lab to get tested.
That's very responsible of you, by the way. Thank you for testing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And got the results back, came back negative. So I'll be getting on a plane tomorrow and heading down to the Texas-Mexico border, which we're going to be covering a lot of stories of incredible ministry that is going on and just the heart-wrenching stories of individuals who are making the trek from Central America, fleeing violence for a new opportunity for their families. So we're really excited as well as intrigued and honored to be going down there to spend time with some incredible human beings. So it's been going well. So big news this week, Autumn, at the Supreme Court.
I know. I always get a little bit nervous when I hear things coming out of the Supreme Court because it's been such a raucous place over the past, 5 to 6 years.
Right, absolutely. Well, news broke this week that Justice Stephen Breyer has announced his retirement, giving President Joe Biden the opportunity to nominate a justice for the Supreme Court. So should be interesting. I wrote an article about Justice Breyer this week at goodfaithmedia.org, and he's a very interesting justice, very level-headed, became known really as a pragmatic justice. Believed in a living constitution. There was always that debate between him and Scalia when Scalia was alive, as well as RGB about originalism versus living constitution. And Breyer made it very clear he believed in the latter, that the Constitution, the framers had an intent, and we need to take that intent into account, but they could not, there's no way they could foresee the issues that we're dealing with today.
Right.
And therefore take that principle, guiding principle that is part of our American legal system, and then apply it generally and liberally to the issues today to render decisions.
So would you say that he has a Jesus worldview of the Constitution, not a biblical worldview?
Yeah, he is. There is no inerrantist in Judge Breyer. he is certainly committed to the Constitution and
Hmm.
upholds its truths to be self-evident. Uh, but his application of the Constitution is more pragmatic
Hmm.
than an ideologue would
Sure.
probably want. But so at any rate, big news. Sad to see Justice Breyer go, uh, but he had hinted for a long time that he did not want to die. Still being a justice, as RGB unfortunately did, and saw it was time for him to go. So,
Yeah.
just a remarkable man. Appreciate his service to our country. And now attention turns to his replacement. And
Yeah. After all the hullabaloo when it was Obama's turn to pick, and then things kicked up from the other side of things that said, oh, it's too late in your term to pick a new one, I appreciate him doing this like well within the first part of Biden's term so that, we can actually have things work as they should.
right, yeah, and mentioning the pick that was stolen from President Obama, and I still believe it was stolen, and
That's the actual stop the steal.
that's exactly right, because Senate Majority Mitch McConnell at the time would not entertain the nomination of Merrick Garland to be on the
Hmm.
Supreme Court. And so, what is so ironic and hypocritical of McConnell and those who were in power at the time in the Senate was that many of them are originalists.
Hmm.
And the Constitution is really clear when it comes to the Supreme Court nominees. And they decided to ignore what the Constitution said.
Hmm.
And so it was blatant hypocrisy on their part. And so uh, when President Trump won the election and got to nominate 3 Supreme Court justices, it was really eye opening for the country. And so uh, I don't know if Breyer would admit that publicly, but I
Right.
think that may have gone into his
Well,
thinking.
there has to be an extra layer of, strategery going on. And I'm really hopeful that it'll be something that's good, not just for one side or the other, but for our country as a whole and to be fair, because that's what the Supreme Court should be.
Right. I agree. And, there are ideologues on each side of the Supreme Court. You certainly have more conservative members who believe in originalism, more liberal justices who believe in a living constitution. And for the most part, historically, they have debated these issues. Many of them have fallen along ideological lines, but there are occasions where uh, decisions are rendered, from the center. And
Right.
it's fascinating to me. I would never have thought um, 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 John Roberts,
Mm.
but John Roberts' title, the
Is he the chief?
yep. Start that again.
Come on, Mitch. You missed chief. Come on. This is like in your roots, my
Oh
dude.
my gosh.
I couldn't get there either. It's
Yeah.
fine.
So what's interesting to me is that a lot of legislation now is, or not legislative, but it's adjudicated from the center. And I would have never thought in a million years that the center now is Chief Justice John Roberts.
I know. There've been some other surprising decisions that have come out, even from Trump's picks,
Yeah.
and I've been really pleasantly surprised a couple of times.
So my hope is that the Supreme Court can get back to the days where they are elevated above the political fray and the partisanship that you find across the street at the Capitol, and can really have robust, rigorous debates on these important issues, and provide the American people guidelines to continue. And it's always going to be an ebb and flow when it comes to Supreme Court.
Yes, and that balance is very important.
Yeah.
Speaking of balance,
Yeah.
Mitch, we talk a lot on this podcast about climate change and about protecting our world and our environment, and it's usually bad news.
Oh, please tell me not another oil spill.
So far, no.
Okay, good.
That they're reporting. Um, but there is some good news about the blue whale population.
Oh, really?
Behold,
What are the blue whales up to these days?
Should I do the report in whale? Because I can speak whale.
I will interpret. You must
Okay.
have, if you speak whale, you must have an interpreter.
I'll put my whale interpreting filter on the mic right now, so I'll just
okay.
speak English. So on South Georgia Island, which I had to look it up, I didn't know where South Georgia was, and it is sort of
That's kind of by Alabama, right?
A different Georgia.
Oh,
It's
okay.
also not Republic of Georgia, which is what I was thinking. How are they saying Wales from the Republic of Georgia? No, this is South Georgia Island, which sits sort of central between uh, the eastern coast of Argentina, the southern tip of Africa, and then Antarctica. So it's like out there in the middle of literally nowhere. And it had a really strong impact on the whaling industry. And there have been some laws and some things that have come out to protect the whales. And I realize we sound like hippie Californians right now talking about saving the whales, but this is important. There have been just a steep decline in the population for the past 80 years of blue whales. And in the past 4 to 5 years, they are seeing an increase. And then in this past year, they've seen a significant increase in their population, which is just great news.
That's incredible news. Now, are they attributing it to anything necessarily?
Yes, some laws protecting whales, basically. So they have imparted some laws that are against whaling and specific types of whaling that are really harmful, and especially in this area. And so that's what they're attributing it to.
Yeah. I'm really interested because this is fascinating to me, and I'm so glad that the blue whales are making a comeback.
That was more Chewbacca than whale, maybe. I don't know.
Oh, but I'm really interested. I mean, we've had this kind of, and not necessarily a complete pause on society, but certainly a slowing down of industry and commerce around the world. Uh, I'm wondering what's going to happen in the next few years with the environment.
Mhm.
Are we going to see any ramifications based upon the pandemic slowdown? And I don't know, there may not be, but I'm wondering if there's any evidence to that as well. And then plus, hopefully countries are continuing to meet the UN Paris Climate Agreement and the goals that they were set. And so I'm hopeful, but we need to be doing it at a much faster pace because there's some significant things that we're about to lose with the environment if we don't. So go Greta.
Absolutely. And just that hope that it's not irreversible.
Right.
Because sometimes it starts to feel like we're just so far gone. Everyone's going to catch Omicron. You know, the world's going to hell in a handbasket, and there are still things that we can do, and our positive choices in this realm really matter.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So glad the whales are coming back. Some very tense news coming out of Ukraine last couple of weeks. Russia is building their military presence on the border of Ukraine and Russia. Looks like Putin is going to invade. It seems inevitable at this point, unless the European Union and the UK and the US and their allies can prevent that somehow through diplomacy. We're all hoping and praying that that is the case. But a lot of jockeying a position right now from President Putin and Russia. So I don't know what's going to come of it. It's kind of a scary time internationally. I know Europe is really tense right now, and we know that we've got a lot of European friends of Good Faith Media who are concerned, and we want you to know that we're praying for you and hoping that a diplomatic, peaceful solution can take place.
Right. As if we need more stressful. I feel like everyone is just sort of at a fever pitch. We are still living in a pandemic, even though some people don't want to admit that that's still happening. There are physical, emotional, mental impacts of that are impacting us individually and as a group. And I think looking at that and admitting that that is a layer to everything that we're dealing with right now, even these giant military situations that are happening, we need to look at through the lens of we are collectively going through something.
Yeah. I saw what's disturbing about this recent buildup, not only the tensions at the border of Ukraine and Russia. What is troubling to me, Autumn, as a U.S. citizen who've had relatives fight and die for their country, that a recent poll indicated that 62% of Republicans felt that President Putin was a stronger leader than President Biden. And many individuals within the Republican Party, not a majority, thank God, but many of them are supportive of Putin as a leader. seen him as a much better leader than President Biden. This, as a kid of the 80s, this is mind blowing to me. Watching President Reagan take on the Soviet Union and Mikhail Gorbachev at the time, he stood at the wall in Berlin and challenged Gorbachev to tear down this wall.
Mhm.
In today's Republican Party, Reagan would have been chastised as someone. And it's mind blowing to me that so many people within the Republican Party see Russia now and Putin's politics and policies. A man who there's plenty of evidence who've assassinated many of his political rivals see him as a better leader than a Democratic president. It's just mind blowing to me.
Well, and I think that's something that a lot of our listeners may not realize is that I'll speak for me and I'll let you answer. Like, I grew up in the Republican Party. I can see things through a Republican lens, and there are a lot of values and things that I respect about that party. What we have seen in the past, decade is a different Republican Party than the one you and I grew up in.
Yeah, 100%. It has moved further and further to the right. I think that there could be an argument made that the Democratic Party has moved to the left, but not at the rapid speed that the Republican Party has moved to the right. There's still, as frustrating as it can be sometimes with the Joe Manchins and the Kristen Sinemas of the world, there still is a middle within the Democratic Party. There are moderate Democrats within the. I don't know of very many moderate Republicans today, and those that are moderate Republicans often cast their ballots and votes with the fundamentalist majority.
Or they're ostracized,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's really the choice they're given. There's not a lot of room.
Yeah. But you're right. The Republican Party today is not the party of Lincoln by far. It's certainly not the party of Eisenhower. I would even make an argument it is not the party of Ronald Reagan anymore. It is the party of Donald Trump, and it is extremist. It is dangerous, and um, it needs to be called out for what it is, and it's very frightening. They are not interested in democracy, and they are interested in ruling, even from a minority position, and it is really terrifying. So, all my Republican friends out there who are working hard to normalize and bring balance to the Republican Party, please keep fighting. Please,
We're rooting for you.
we are rooting for you. We need a two-party system. We need a balance
Yes.
in this country, and so I keep rooting for them. But yeah, a lot of disturbing news coming out of Ukraine and Russia, but also disturbing news on how some Americans are reacting to it. Well, Autumn, you and I sat down with a very interesting gentleman this week, student Awesome, I should say, is a Muslim who lives in Toronto, Canada, and has a website, Islamophobia.io. And the concept is very simple. It is inviting people to tell stories about Islamophobia. It may be an encounter they had, or maybe a victim of Islamophobia, or a situation where they witnessed Islamophobia taking place. And it's the bigotry and the vitriol and the hatred towards the Muslim community. And we loved sitting down with him because it was the power of story. So, do you have a story that you like to share about Islamophobia?
Well, I shared one in our interview with Student Awesome, and I don't want to spoiler my
Right.
own story, but I think it's one of Student Awesome's platforms, I guess you might say, is to take the Z out of Muslim and
Right.
Islam, and that's a distinction that I didn't really know was a thing,
Right.
that you should say Muslim and Islam. And as soon as we found that out, then we corrected and thank you. I want to know more. And I think that is sort of a small picture of what can be accomplished if you just open the dialogue with someone who's Muslim.
And student Awesome certainly, he certainly promotes himself as a student of life and culture and religion and politics. But he's also a teacher, And so we appreciate the lessons that he has taught us during this interview. Um, this is an important issue. I hope you stay tuned and listen to this interview because I've got friends here in the Oklahoma City metro area. One is a friend to the pod, Mom Imad and Chauncey. He's a dear friend of mine. And I can't tell you the number of stories that I've heard from him
Mhm.
and other Muslim friends here in Oklahoma City where Islamophobia is front and center. And um, it's not even subtle, Autumn.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
it is an attack on the Muslim people, and it is a tragedy. It is insulting. It is un-American, and I would even argue it is unchristian,
Oh, absolutely
as
it
these people
is.
are acting towards Muslim individuals. And so, stay tuned for the interview. We think it's really good, and check out his website, Islamophobia.io. Stay tuned.
I'm Starlette Thomas, and I invite you to join us for Good Faith Stories. It's a new podcast series from Good Faith Media. In each episode of Good Faith Stories, we'll bring you a collection of different stories tied to a theme. Unique and true stories as told by the people who live them. Each story is short, 6 or 7 minutes, with a little mood music. Listen to Good Faith Stories wherever you get your podcasts, and find us online at goodfaithmedia.org.
Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, we've got a very special guest. Student Assam Hussain, known professionally as @Student Assam, is a Canadian author, filmmaker, and creative producer. His work explores the meaning of giving. He is the author of 5 picture books, producer social concepts, and including an artistic human progress collage, Islamophobia.io. Take the Z out, and one of his films has played in the film festival internationally. Islamophobia.io is the most recent project. He's running an international letter writing campaign currently for the 5-year anniversary of the victims of the Quebec City Mosque Massacre. He's received almost 40 letters from the public at this point. Student Assam, I should say, welcome to Good Faith Weekly.
Thank you very much, Mitch, for having me. I just wanted to say that the pronunciation is actually Student Awesome, and that's how I go by. Yeah.
Okay, Student Awesome. So let's start there, Student Awesome. Let's begin with your name and why do you go by that title, Student Awesome?
Student Awesome is my philosophy on how I try to do my work. It's really comes out of a struggle, I think, to try to reach myself and maybe somebody else. And student approach, I think, is important in the idea that I am trying to be curious, try to be resourceful. I may not have all the tools all the time, but trying to learn as I go and trying to just take a step at a time. And I think that helps, not really thinking too much about too many things, but just focusing on the immediate steps that I feel I need to take. And things tend to reveal themselves and kind of just go like that and see how it goes.
And I think that's such an important concept and one that is being challenged today, in some cases even being lost. I love this idea of this lifelong learning as a student. How does that philosophy? Why is that philosophy so important, especially in regard to your projects? This idea of lifelong learning and always being a student of culture, religion, and the world.
I mean, if I can be a student, I'm fortunate. I think I'm more desperate than anything else, to be honest. I mean, I never kind of, it's kind of hard to put things into words when you have a lot going on creatively that you're thinking about. But I think it's more really just a struggle to reach. And if I can be a lifelong learner, if I can stay active, I mean, those are questions I don't really think about, to be honest. I really think about the moment because I think the moment defines the next moment. So I'm more focused on just taking a step, to be honest, and trying to land that step. And, maybe it'll end up appearing like it's a lifelong movement, but we'll have to see.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, your website is phenomenal. You've launched Islamophobia.io. So tell us what inspired you to launch this website and what it's about.
Islamophobia.io is a outreach project driven by Muslims and allies and those people who want to stand up for Muslim communities. And that outreach is shown through the power of story. And so these are written submissions that are opportunities for people from these communities to come and tell their truths, because they're extremely telling when you talk about yourself in your own voice.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes a special invitation now for the public when there's so much misinformation, especially about Muslim communities and other communities that are taken as Muslim. There's very, very strong narratives that really create a lot of sadness and confusion, or just a lot of wonder about who you are if you are from these communities. It's really hard to reclaim narratives when I think there should be more ways to do that. So this is an opportunity to really reclaim narratives, a way to do something about it, a way to make change. It's been designed to be very simple, and it's instant. These stories tend to be published quickly. And again, they are opportunities for the public to come and read and benefit from. And perhaps they will give you pause and something to think about.
Excellent.
So, are the submissions to your website predominantly from Muslim people?
Yes and no. I mean, it's more about communities that have overlap with Muslim people, allies, people who want to do something about Islamophobia, or people who just want to tell their story and have some interaction with the Muslim community. There's so many invisible stories. There's so many conversations that happen. I mean, these stories are categorized, so there's many categories like mom, brother, love, pets. I mean, I just did a Google search the other day on pets, but you don't see any Muslim people just having pets. I mean, it's like you would think that no Muslim people ever have pets in their lives. I mean, so just telling a story about your pet could open someone's eyes and help them realize that the conversation around Muslims is a lot more bigger than just talking about one or two things, or just talking about the Middle East all day long. I mean, it's a very broad, and I do believe that there's a poetic connection to prejudice. By talking about your cat, or by talking about love, there's a connection. Just by you being the storyteller coming from within these communities, I think there's a connection to just prejudice overall, because we're living in a system where I think there's a narrative against the Muslim people by default.
Yes. So I grew up in a very small town in Texas. We had one traffic light, and that was it. And I had never met a Muslim person until I went to college. And it wasn't like a thriving metropolis where I went to college. It was Lubbock, Texas, and it was mostly cotton fields and oil derricks. But I started college in August of 2001. And so you can sort of imagine where this story is going. I met some of my first Muslim friends in some of my science classes, and we were study partners, and we had a couple of labs together. And then 9/11 happened. And I didn't know them well, my new classmates, but because they were the first folks that I had met that had this religion that I had only ever really read about, and definitely had only heard it pronounced with the Z, as you said. I didn't know any different. And I had this moment where I was.
Say that though. I love how you say Muslim. Like it's
Muslim. I'm working really hard, right, to say it the right way. So I was driving in downtown Lubbock, and it is just flat. The real. Of course, we were all grieving. We were all wondering what was happening next during that time. We were all away from our parents for the first time, experiencing this, national tragedy. But I'm also seeing it from a different perspective of these new friends who were feeling the same way, and who start telling me about how they are being they're feeling scorn, I guess,
Mm.
is the best way to describe that. So I'm driving, and there were these cotton farmers who were very upset because they grounded all the airplanes, even the crop dusting airplanes. So basically, these airplanes need to drive to kill the cotton so they can pick the cotton, and they can't because no one knows what's going on. And I see a student walking just off campus, and it's clearly a Muslim student. And there is a Lubbock police car just following this student who just has a backpack, is on the way to lab. And like, I just started crying because I'm like, the whole system is broken. It's broken start to finish. And, at 18, it was just such a moment for me. And I think if I hadn't been where I was at that time, like if I'd still been in my little podunk town, I don't know that my eyes would have seen what I saw.
No, yeah. I mean, I think the unfortunate thing is that there's bigger forces at play, and citizens and common people get pitted in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
um, I feel like I don't know. The world is very unfair, where certain people are painted to be good, and certain people are painted to be bad. I think it feels like we're living in the wild, wild west. You mentioned Texas. It's like a
Yes.
cowboys and Indians kind of movie playing out here all over again. I thought we'd be a lot smarter uh, than that by now, but it seems like it's the same kind of narrative. Unfortunately, that there's one good group and one bad group.
So,
Unfortunately.
student,
Mm,
let me ask that question because I think
mm.
that is extremely important. First of all, and we probably should have done this at the beginning of the interview. Can you, for our listeners, define what Islamophobia
Oh,
is
I skipped
for
that
you?
question to tell my story. Sorry, Mitch.
No, that's
I
fine.
got carried away.
But what exactly is the definition of Islamophobia, and why do you still think it's so paramount in culture today? Because you would think after all these years we'd be educated and it would have gotten better, but it seems to, in some instances, I guess we've made progress, but in others it seems like we've taken a step backwards. So define it for us, and then tell us why you think it's still paramount today.
I mean, it's analogous to like anti-Semitism. It's really like when you say someone's anti-Semitic, it really means that there's a prejudice against the Jewish community. Generally at a high level, that's really what it means. Um, and I guess there's different variations of what anti-Semitic means. It's been redefined several times, and it also depends who says it, right? Whether it's one group or another. There's different degrees of this definition, but generally it means there's a prejudice against a group like against the Jewish community, for example. So similarly, they wouldn't, for me, to be very honest, I don't really academically, there's a definition for it, but again, it's similar to the Jewish community in the sense that there's a prejudice against the Muslim community.
Yeah.
That's really how I look at it.
And
Um,
there's overt Islamophobia, and there's also systemic Islamophobia, where systems are in place that devalue the Muslim community and look at them and treat them differently than their Anglo
yeah,
counterparts.
case in point, when Donald Trump said that there was that Muslims, we need to figure out what the hell is going on. I mean, how could somebody at that level of he's the highest person in the country, he could never say that, because it goes against the Constitution of the United States of America, where you you deny a group of people based on religion. But that is so ignorant, because how do you define that? How do you determine someone's what? Is it religiosity? Is it skin color level? Is it like Dr. Oz? I mean, he's also Muslim. I mean, but he's on a lot of talk shows. Is he also banned from the United States? Muhammad Ali and these other people. I mean, there's all kinds of like. I mean, there's people who have connections with Muslims all over the world, but it was just that's textbook Islamophobia right there, right? I mean, that's dangerous Islamophobia there, right there, because it emboldens people to just look at somebody and say, you don't belong here and you need to leave. And you can't do that. He needed to be reprimanded and removed just based on that. Because if you dare to do that to any other group, you would be removed. But Muslims are the can you kick around, and you get points for, and you benefit from. So hey, if that's, I mean, I think it's despicable.
Do you think it's still paramount because there has been a backlash against the push towards a more diverse culture? Because, I mean, we saw this in the presidential election when Barack Obama was running for president, and there were people out there calling him a Muslim as though that were somehow a bad thing. And I do appreciate there were people on the right who actually stood up for candidate Obama at the time, saying he was a good man, and it didn't matter if he was Christian or Muslim. He was a good man either way, and that shouldn't define him as good or evil in their eyes. And then after the Obama administration, it seemed to really ramp up with the Trump administration and this Islamic fervor that was in the culture. My question for you, do you think it's still paramount? Because white supremacy, in all of its negativity, is making an attempt to retain power that they've always had in culture. It doesn't matter if it's Canadian or American or other parts of the world, that there's this growing or this ever present, I should say, white supremacy that says white is better, Christian is better, and everybody else needs to find their place in society.
I mean, just read the Constitution of the United States of America. I mean, if you have other religions that are able to be in the United States and function just like any other Christian would, then go back and try to understand the academic roots of the country and how it ideally should function. It's just that there's a majority group of people and there's a minority group of people. I remember reading Soul Sister from Grace Halsell. She was working for Lyndon Johnson in the 60s, and she actually did a social experiment back then and turned herself into a black woman. And she journeyed into Harlem and into the South, and it was so harrowing of the details that she wrote about. Such a courageous woman, that it's, this is the kind of stuff that people of color live with. You have to almost pretty much, it's like you're begging for your humanity. You got to define yourself. You got to, there's definitions and stuff. You have to, constantly explain. As was mentioned earlier, you're surveilled. It's really difficult, when there's a system that doesn't trust you. And I think it is unfortunate when there's this narrative again again, I live in Canada, so it's a bit different here. We're not a hegemonic state. We don't go around telling people what to do. However, I feel the U.S. Has an issue with that.
Sure.
But there's so much inside the U.S. that should be cleaned up. Honestly, there's so much to do within your own home. Yeah. It just baffles me as to spending so much money somewhere else when there's so much you can do at home.
What really intrigues me
is the Christian principle to take care of your home.
Sure.
Yes.
What really intrigues me about your goals and your website, Islamophobia.io, is that it concentrates on story. And you and I have had conversations previously to this interview about the power of narrative. Why did you decide to concentrate on narrative, and why is narrative so powerful of a tool?
I think it's transformative. It's something that is an intimate experience between you and the narrative itself. It gives you many things. It can give you pause. It can help you reflect. It can take you somewhere where you used to be. I think that when you hear a truth of another person in their voice, or at least even as a written account, I think there's something there that is I think something there that's authentic. And the way I've set up the site, I don't need perfect storytellers. I don't need people to be from the exclusive club, because in every community there's that exclusive club, those 16 people that keep talking about the community. Let's let everyone talk about themselves and the communities that they involve themselves with in their own voice, right? Because there's everyone has a truth, and everyone has their own experiences. And if we open it up to more people, explaining and not explaining, but sharing and telling their stories, then I think the amount of learning that can happen is amplified.
I love that. That's great.
Stories worked for Muhammad. Stories worked for Jesus. So why shouldn't they work for us?
Well,
right?
even preceding that, it's God. God knows the
Yes.
power of storytelling.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Much of the Bible and the Quran are filled with stories.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a verse in the Quran that says, so relate stories that perhaps they will give thought.
Yeah.
So stories are meant to are tools of engagement and tools of sharing. And I think the idea of wrapping an experience up in story is a way to communicate with others. Right? If you talk about a complex subject as a story, and all of a sudden it becomes acceptable.
Yeah. And speaking of stories, you've got two really important projects going on right now, the Jan 29 and museum projects. So tell our listeners a little bit about those two projects.
So the Jan 29 campaign I have right now is to commemorate the victims of the Quebec City Mosque shooting massacre that happened on January 29th, 2017, 5 years ago from today. And I thought that, it was very, very important for the public to get involved and have an opportunity to write a letter of remembrance. And here's the reason why. That day will come and that day will go. And being from the Muslim community, it really goes down by, there's a couple of news reports. This is a heinous attack. I mean, these are 6 fathers and 6 citizens. There's a lot of people who tell me this is not my experience, but when you put it like that, these are 6 fathers, 6 citizens, 6 people that were your neighbors. It's like, okay, I mean, I can understand that, because I mean, those are 6 human beings. It doesn't matter what faith you're from, does it really? I mean, if someone blew away 6 fathers in your neighborhood, I mean, would it really matter?
Right.
So I think that when we shift from just listening about this incident to maybe doing something about this incident, it becomes interesting now. It becomes engaging. It becomes an opportunity for the public to do something about it, right? And when the act of writing a letter of remembrance is doing something about it, it's like, and the letters I've received from across the country I'm just amazed and honored to be able to be a part of that to even do something here. But really the focus is doing something about it. I think if we do something about it, it can create a shift.
Right.
Right. So really, the museum concept that really is kind of the vision that I have, is to curate some of these initiatives that I have now as perpetual change-making opportunities, because Jan 29 is going to come and go. I'm not interested in just one day. I'm interested in change-making. So it's about change-making. It's not about just the lights and the cameras for one day. So these letters are digital, and they will be around on January the 30th. They will be around on February the 1st. They
Right.
will be around February the 1st, 2023, inshallah, God willing. So the idea is that you can come across and encounter these letters at any time.
Yeah.
It's proactive. It's not reactive.
Right. Yeah, I like that a lot. So, student Awesome, we are coming to a close in our interview, and Autumn's got one last question here for you in a second. Before I pitch it to her, a lot of times here at Good Faith Weekly, we analyze a lot of the problems and issues that the world faces, and we recognize those and we call those out, and we try to shine some light into those into those dark places. But we also try to shine a light into the future. And so my last question before I turn it over to Autumn is, do you see hope? Do you see some progress being made across the world where there is a future where peace and understanding and mutuality and respect can persist?
Absolutely. Most of my teachers in my life were white and Christian growing up in Canada. I've had the most amazing teachers in my life. I'm still in touch with my grade 1 teacher.
Mhm.
She was an amazing, amazing teacher. And so, I do believe from the letters I've received and the kind of work I'm trying to do, I think there are a lot of good people out there. And I think that there always will be.
Mhm.
I think that it's important to work with these kinds of people and continue to work together. And I truly believe that through projects where people can collaborate and there's opportunities, I think it's about innovation, to be honest, where you can bring more people together. Honestly, like the letter writing campaign I have right now, I feel like some of the letters that I've received, people wouldn't probably have written if this opportunity wasn't there.
Mm.
So sometimes it's about the opportunities that arise that then bring people out of the woodwork and out of all kinds of places that you didn't even know existed. So I hope to try to continue to innovate and to think about new ways of engaging and providing maybe some concepts that myself and others can engage in to amplify the idea of giving and the idea of good.
Well, we appreciate all the hard work you're doing. It is making a difference, my friend. So thank you so much. Well, Autumn's got the last question that we ask every one of our guests. So Autumn, take it away.
Our tagline at Good Faith Media is "There's more to tell." So in light of your work and our conversation here today, what is your more to tell, Student Awesome?
I appreciate that. I think that I invite the public, especially the American public. I've lived in New York City before. It's one of my favorite cities. So I invite the public to tell a story and save a life. When you come to Islamophobia.io, just by you sharing a story, I bet you someone will read your account, and there is no story that is too small. Every story matters, and your story matters, and you will make a difference. I invite you to come to Islamophobia.io and share.
Student Awesome, thank you so much for taking some time out this week to talk to us at Good Faith Weekly. We really do appreciate all the hard work you're doing, and we applaud the hard work you're doing because it's not easy, but you're doing good work and practicing good faith. So thank you, my friend. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
To our listeners, we want to thank you for tuning in this week. We always appreciate you, and that is Islamophobia.io. Again, that's Islamophobia.io. Student Awesome, thank you so much for being with us. And to our listeners, thank you as well. And until next week, keep living good faith.